Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to another Poetry Tuesday. It's a Tuesday, and I'm doing poetry for reals instead of the last time, maybe the time before. I don't know when this is coming out, where it wasn't actually poetry, even though it was a Tuesday. Today, I'm going to be talking about the poetry of Emily Dickinson. I bought this Dover thrift edition, but it was cheap, a 50-page selection of 100 of her various poems, and I read it, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars because Emily Dickinson would have been my friend. I would have been her friend, we would have been friends, and it would have been great. And we would have wrote emo poetry and been so proud of ourselves and shared them. She has way more merit than my emo poetry does, but in any case, we would have had a ball in drawing rooms, sipping tea, and being American and depressed. You might be asking yourself, well, okay, Emily Dickinson, I've heard about her, which means has to be boring, right? Because all of the poets that you hear about and study in high school or in various classes are the canon, and they're boring because a lot of the canon is boring. Well, I am coming to the belief that canon isn't actually boring, that though canon is problematic in what is stressed in canon, you can find valuable things in canon. And Emily Dickinson, I believe, is one of those valuable things. I love her poetry because it's short. I love short poetry. Some poems are a couple, just like 2 stanzas long, 8 lines or 15 lines, just small little things. I really adore short poetry, and so I'm so pleased to see an entire collection of short poems. I also really appreciated the fact that at her time, the forms that she was creating her poetry in were experimental. You do you, Emily. You do you. That was something very, very interesting to bring to the reading experience, knowing a bit of that historical information. And I also really enjoy the themes that she seems to favor, including grief and death and loneliness, which, I am just a chipper happy birthday balloon, aren't I? But in any case, I really enjoy those themes. I don't think that they are in enough poetry, fiction, nonfiction. I think there's enough of it in the world, but we just kind of don't talk about it. And I think that is a juxtaposition that I'm uncomfortable with. I really enjoyed how she made those themes prominent in her work. But, of course, how do you know if you're interested in Dickinson if you don't read any of her poetry or don't hear any of her poetry read? Well, I got you covered. Here comes some poems. So I read these aloud out to myself and a cat. I was fostering a cat at the time, and I just had a pen next to me so I could heart things all over the place. A lot of these poems are untitled, which is, totally fine. I think I drew a heart next to half of these 100 poems, something very close to half, if not half. So many of them explored things that I really liked or had language that I really liked. So I'm going to read to you 2, 3, 4, depending upon what my eyes fall in front of. So here's one of her more famous poems. It is entitled Hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all, and sweetest in the gale is heard. And sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. And here is an untitled poem where an imperial affliction came from, which is the fictional novel in the novel The Fault in Our Stars, which I actually really loved when I read it last year, so, no judging. Anyway, here's the poem. There's a certain slant of light on winter afternoons that oppresses, like the weight of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us. We can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it anything. 'Tis the seal. Despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. This is the sea of sunset. This is the land the sunset washes. These are the banks of the yellow sea, where it rose or whither it rushes. These are the western mystery. Night after night her purple traffic strews the landing with opal bales. Merchantmen poise upon horizons, dip, and vanish with fairy sails. Okay, one more. Okay, just one more. Gotta pick a good one. Ooh, okay, found one. This one's called A Book. There is no frigate like a book that takes us lands away, nor any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may the poorest take without oppressive toll. How frugal is the chariot that bears a human soul. So if any of those poems, the kind of shortness, the language, the themes interest you, I highly recommend you pick up a collection of Emily Dickinson's poetry, maybe a nicer or thicker one than this one I have here. I can't decide if I want to get more of her poetry or if I just like the short and sweet selected poems selection that I have here, because this certainly doesn't do her work justice. Like, this doesn't look like a book that I would love. Do you know what I mean? Like, this doesn't look treasured because it's a Dover thrift edition of a classic. But then again, I'm not sure if I would want to read 500 pages of her poems as much as I love them, because that takes a lot of effort, right? And I don't want to wear out the love we have. So maybe one day we'll get a different edition, the royal we will get a different edition of Emily Dickinson's poems, but for the time being, I just really enjoyed this, and I'm so glad it was like $4 in Canada, which is unheard of for a new book. It says it's $2.50 in the USA, so if you don't end up loving her, it's not a complete waste of your money, but if you do end up loving her, at least you don't have to give it back to the library. Thank you for watching me blither on about Emily Dickinson and how we would have been sisses. Because bros, we wouldn't have been bros because we're not men. I don't think she identified as male. I don't identify as male, but cis is just, Until next time, please go read some poems by Emily Dickinson if you are at all interested, and as always, continue to be lovely.